First reading. A reading from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 50, verses 4 to 7. Lord Yahweh has given me a disciple's tongue for me to know how to give a word of comfort to the weary. Morning by morning, he makes my ear alert to listen like a disciple. Lord Yahweh has opened my ear, and I have not resisted. I have not turned away. I have offered my back to those who struck me, my cheeks to those who plucked my beard. I have not turned my face away from insult and spitting. Lord Yahweh comes to my help. This is my insult has not touched me. This is why I have set my face like flint, and know that I shall not be put to shame. This is the word of Lord. Thanks be to God. Second reading. A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Philippians, chapter 2, verses 6 to 11. Who, being in the form of God, did not count equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, becoming as human beings are, and being in every way like a human being. He was humbled yet, even to accepting death, death on a cross. And for this, God raised him high and gave him the name which is above all other names, so that all beings in the heavens, on earth, and in the underworld should bend the knee at the name of Jesus, and that every tongue should acknowledge Jesus Christ as Lord, to the glory of God the Father. This is the word of Lord. Thanks be to God. A reading from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 23, verses 1 to 49. The whole assembly then rose, and they brought him before Pilate. They began their accusation by saying, "We found this man inciting our people to revolt, opposing payment of the tribute to Caesar, and claiming to be Christ a king." Pilate put to him this question, "Are you the king of Jews?" He replied, "It is you who say it." Pilate then said to the chief priest and the crowd, "I find no case against this man." But they persisted his inflaming the people with his teaching all over Judea and all the way from Galilee, where he started, down to here. When Pilate heard this, he asked if the man were a Galilean. And finding that he came under Herod's jurisdiction, he passed him over to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Herod was delighted to see Jesus. He had heard about him and had been wanting for a long time to set eyes on him. Moreover, he was hoping to see more miracle worked by him. So he questioned him at some length, but without getting any reply. Meanwhile, the chief priests and the scribes were there, vigorously pressing their accusations. Then Herod, together with his guards, treated him with contempt and made fun of him. He put a rich cloak on him and sent him back to the Pilate. And though Herod and Pilate had been enemies before, they were reconciled that same day. Pilate then summoned the chief priest and the leading men and the people. He said to them, "You brought this man before me as a popular agitator. Now I have gone into the matter myself in your presence, and found no grounds in the man for any of the charges you bring against him. Nor has Herod either, since he has sent him back to us. As you can see, the man has done nothing that deserves death. So I shall have him flogged and then let him go." But as one man they haul away with him, "Give us Barabbas." This man has been thrown into prison because of a riot in the city and murdered. In his desire to set Jesus free, Pilate addressed them again. But they shouted back, "Crucify him, crucify him." And for the third time he spoke to them, "But what harm has this man done? I have found no case against him that deserves death. So I shall have him flogged and then let him go." But they kept on shouting at the top of their voice, demanding that he should be crucified. And their shouts kept growing louder. Pilate then gave his verdict. Their demands was to be granted. He released the man they asked for, who has been imprisoned because of rioting and murder, and handed Jesus over to them to deal with as they pleased. As they were leading him away, the seized man on a man, Simon from Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and made him shoulder the cross and carry it behind Jesus. Large numbers of people followed him, and women too, who mourned and lamented for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep rather for yourselves and for your children. For look, the days were surely coming when people will say, Blessed are those who are barren, the wombs that have never borne children, the breasts that have never suckled. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, to the hills, cover us. For if this is what is done to green wood, what will be done when the wood is dry? Now they were also leading out two others, criminals, to be executed with him. When they reached the place called the skull, there they crucified him and the two criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. Then they cast lots to share out his clothing. The people stayed there watching. As for the leaders, they jeered at him with the words, He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one. The soldiers mocked him too, coming up to him, offering him vinegar, and saying, If you are the king of Jews, save yourself. Above him there was an inscription, This is the king of the Jews. One of the criminals hanging there abused him. Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us as well. But the other spoke up and rebuked him. Have you no fear of God at all? He said. You got the same sentence as he did. But in our case, we deserve it. We are paying for what we did. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. He answered him, In truth I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. It was now about the sixth hour, and the sun's light failed, so that darkness came over the whole land until the ninth hour. The veil of the sanctuary was torn right down the middle. Jesus cried out in a loud voice, saying, Father, into your hand I commit my spirit. With these words he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he gave praise to God and said, Truly, this was an upright man. And when all the crowds who had gathered for the spectacle saw what had happened, they went home beating their breasts. All his friends stood at the distance. So also did the women who had accompanied him from Galilee and saw all this happen.